afternoon, everybody. My name is Maria Victoria Abreu. Welcome to Global Foundation for Democracy and Development, GFDD. We are a non-profit organization founded and led by former President of the Dominican Republic, Leonel Fernandez, and we organize the Dominican Republic Environmental Film Festival, DREFF. As DREFF, we are partners of DC Environmental Film Festival, DCEFF, for many, many years. And we are happy and grateful for having that partnership with them. Every year we screen a Dominican documentary as part of their program. This year we decided to be more creative, and in addition to screening a Dominican film, apágala. Sorry. In addition to screening a film. Okay. In addition to screening a Dominican short film, we did that on Sunday with other short films from Mexico and Brazil. This year we also are doing a panel discussion on a topic that we believe that it's very interesting and timely, and it's on Sargassum. We decided to name the event an environmental thread. I already had some threads of this is not a thread. It's an opportunity, but I love that. But I love that happens because this is the whole point. We need to learn more. I'm from the Dominican Republic, and I have to admit that less than 2 years ago, I was trying to swim in the Punta Cana beaches, and I couldn't because it was flooded with sargassum, and we really didn't understand what was it, where is this coming from, what's happening. So this year we decided to do this, and we are lucky to have with us an amazing lineup of experts. We have with us here in the room Dr. Donald Johnson, Senior Research Scientist from the Gulf Coast Research Laboratory and a retired physical oceanographer from the Naval Research Laboratory, Stennis Space Center.
That's right.
Please correct me in my English. I'm not a native English speaker. We have Dr. David Freestone, Executive Secretary of the Sargasso Sea Commission. He has written widely on the law of the sea and international environmental law, and is the founder and editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Marine and Coastal Law, now in its 33rd year. And we also have with us here Mr. Mark Spalding, President of the Ocean Foundation, member of the Ocean Studies, Board of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and Senior Fellow at the Center for the Blue Economy at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies.
And Sargasso Sea Commissioner.
There you go. I'm summarizing their extent resume. With us via Zoom video conference, and let's say hello to them, we have Dr. Chuanmin Hu. He's a Ph.D. in physics, author and an expert on optical oceanography from the University of South Florida College of Marine Science. His research is focused on addressing coastal ocean problems using primarily optics. We also have Manolo Despradel, who's the general manager of Algeanova, a Dominican Republic company that collects and transforms sargassum. And we have Michael Keine, who's in Canada right now, and he works with a company that works with Algeanova and the Dominican Republic in transforming the sargassum. So I think we have all bases covered. We're gonna start with Dr. Johnson, and then I'll guide you through the rest of the program. Thank you for being here.
Well, good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm honored to represent my colleagues, Jim Franks, Hazel Oxenford, Shelley Ann Cox, Emmett Doyle. They're fisheries biologists and ecologists. I'm a physical oceanographer. So you're going to learn more about probably ocean currents than you really wanted to know before you got in here. But I want to point out some significant early contributions from Dongshang Ko from the Naval Research Lab, who's an expert on modeling, and the backtracking that it did to get us involved in this. Okay, so what is it? Well, it's a brown macroalgae. It's seaweed, but most seaweed that you're probably familiar with are the holdfast kind that grows up from the bottom in shallow waters. It's pelagic. It's the holopelagic is the part of the word pelagic comes from the classical Greek, which means open sea. You can't see the rest of the sea over there, but it means open seas. And holopelagic means that it spends all of its life at sea. It's born at sea, it goes through its life processes at sea, and it dies at sea. It tends to cling together, which is important in physical oceanography because of the way it's moved around by the winds and the waves. It clings together in large mats, and it's unusual for that. And it can be 1 to 2 meters thick. It's not just at least ours down there in the North Tropical Atlantic or just at the sea surface. It reproduces vegetatively. That means that it breaks off. It's asexual. It breaks off, and the new bits start growing again from that. And it provides an open ocean, open sea ecosystem. When this first came out, and we first heard of this in the early spring of 2011, an alarm went out over the GCFI net. Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute has an email net. Emma Doyle and Jim Franks put out, and you probably can't read that very well, but put out a little fact sheet because people were, you know, what the heck is going on? It was impacting a lot of the potential impacts there were serious. And it's sort of to calm things down a bit and look at some best practices with it. And they put in this little fact sheet about what it is the impact on the fishers and impact on the beaches. I just wanted to point out that was sort of early on. So where did it come from? And I'm going to use this old chart, old map. It's from the 1850s. It's derived from the 1850s. You probably see it on a lot of National Geographic kind of things. They're globes. But the main, and you can see down, let's see if we have, I can't find the pointer there. Okay, let's do this. South America, North America, Africa, and within this, the thing that impacts your eye the most is this circulation in the North Atlantic called the North Atlantic Gyre. Well, there's an equal circulation in each of the oceans, the South Atlantic Gyre, South Pacific, North Pacific. And these gyres are set up by the winds and the Earth's rotation. Okay, it looks like there is no currents in this area, but there are strong currents. What you're seeing is average currents, or persistent currents, we would call them. But in this area, there are the strong eddies. These eddies are formed from this whole system along here, the winds forming the eddies. They migrate to the west on the Earth's rotation. And over in this region, let's see, is the Sargasso Sea, where things accumulate. Plastics, all of that stuff in the ocean surface tend to accumulate over there. And that's the Sargasso Sea, basically. I mean, just a schematic to represent it. Also accumulates in the Gulf of Mexico because of, there seems to be, people have said there is a loop that goes through here. It breaks off and comes over into the Western Gulf. And but in 2011, we began to hear reports, first in Trinidad and Tobago, and then you know, later on and off the coast of Brazil down to Fernando de Noronha. I hope you can see this right off the very tip of Brazil. But also a little later on, we heard arriving at about the same time over in Sierra Leone, off West Africa, and around the coast into Nigeria. And then lastly, and it will come up later on, Russian bottom expedition to survey the bottom in the area found this on the massive amounts in various states of decay on the bottom there over the the Mid-Atlantic ridge. And it was also, they could see in their ships around there. So if you take a look, basically where did it come from? The only way you can get from here, now it's spreading bits and pieces of this stuff all around this North Atlantic Gyre, so that's not a problem of getting the small amounts. But the only way to get it down into this area, you'll see, comes along the coast of Africa. This is not a very persistent current, but it can be fairly strong. And getting it down into this area, and then from there the South Equatorial current, bringing it across, into the North Brazil current. And right in this area, there's something called the North Brazil retroflexion, where in the summertime, it retroflects back into this fairly strong northeast countercurrent that set up by basically the winds patterns in the area. So we have something that a kind of a recirculation pattern like the big eddies up here, and I call it the North Equatorial Recirculation region, just to communicate with my biology friends, because I didn't want to say South Equatorial, North Brazil current, retroflexion, etc. So we'll call it the NER. Okay, and you can see that it kind of cycles around in here. Well, so the working hypothesis came like this. It probably came into this region along the coast of Africa. Don't know how much. Could have been small amounts. It got involved in this kind of recirculation region over on this. And from satellite track drifters, you can see that there looks like a region that it kind of just recirculates around and around. It can grow well over there. There's low wind, so its mortality is not going to be broken up easily. Its mortality is going to be low. There's a lot of nutrients coming in. The Congo River is coming into this area. Equatorial upwelling along the coast of Africa, and African dust coming off. And then there's this retroflexion area I talked about, is another area where it kind of seemed to accumulate. So we have, at times, communication between this area and this with the southeast equatorial current. And in early spring, this comes zooming right up the coast in here. But in summer, with the setup of the north equatorial current, it goes back. So now we have an opportunity for oscillation back and forth between that, particularly in winter when this current breaks down. And most of the time you have a northeast equatorial countercurrent. North equatorial countercurrent, wow. Don't want to call it the NER. Okay, so in wintertime when it breaks down, now this stuff starts going back to the west and northwest, and that's where the Russians found it, up in this area, because of this counterflow that's taken off. So what we have in the area, during the winter, this NER should flush. This whole thing should flush out to the west-northwest. But you have exchanges between here and here. Now that it's grown so big, so massive in there, that it's going back and forth between here. Some of it flushing out, but a lot of it just going back and forth. And there seems to be several years gap in arrival over here because of that. Sometimes it's on this side, sometimes it's on that side. So where did it come from? Okay, most likely from the North Atlantic in sufficient quantity. And the question is there a critical mass of this stuff, like there is in a lot of fisheries, a critical mass in order to really bloom? We don't know, because we don't know that much about it, this stuff, before the winter current reversal occurs. And once in this NER, it takes different routes from different bloom consolidation regions to different parts of the Caribbean in different seasons. So now we've got a very complex, it's sounding complex, it's very simple actually, but there's a lot of little layers to this thing. So why now is the next question. Ooh, I think we're covering up my important. Can you move that over just a hair? There you go. Okay. Now you see in 2010, before this all occurred, there's these significant peaks that occur. These are climate indices. These are some significant climate indices that are meaningful for our area of concern. This has to dealing with the North Atlantic gyre, okay? This is the temperature down in the equatorial region, and this is the equatorial dynamics. And right in 2010, you see there's, would be, the way it works, it's a negative peak, and this would be a strengthening of the North Atlantic gyre. This would, higher temperatures and more amplitude of equatorial dynamics. But the thing, we thought, okay, now we've got it nailed that this is just going to continue, but it did not. There's no smoking gun. In other words, I can't tell you that it was caused by a change in winds. So my feeling with this whole thing is that there's a nonlinear biophysical interaction due to these decadal climate scale oscillations. Okay, in other words, if you push the climate over to this point, it's going to have a serious impact on the fisheries. But if you push it back, things don't change back to the way they were. Okay, because of the biological interaction. Okay, so another uncertainty in here, and we don't know, is African dust. There's iron, manganese, and changing ocean pH all involved. And if you're a gardener, you know that iron is important to nutrient uptake. Okay, and we don't know how that fits in. So what are the negative impacts of this? Well, tourism and health are obvious. I mean, this has some pretty consequential impacts on health as well as tourism. On the shoreline ecology, most certainly. Under shoreline ecology, turtle nesting along these beaches. They're damaged from removal. That's a big one. If you don't do it right, just take bulldozers out there, you can mess up everything. There's damage to coral reef. It covers the coral reefs, okay? And it provides a lot of sediment-like in the water. Little sunlight can get to it. Does the same thing for seagrasses. So there's actually turtle and porpoise drownings. They're air breathers. Some of these mats are so thick they can't get up, okay? It impacts fisheries because a whole variety of reasons. We'll talk a little about that in a little bit. But let me just show you. I got this off Google, one of their Google Maps, and it's, this is Skeets Bay. It's on the windward side of Barbados. Okay, and what you see is sort of a typical little embayment with an offshore reef. Okay, and shoreline, the waves are all along onto the shoreline. It's Barbados is an old coral reef island. It's not a volcanic island. And if you look closely, you can see dark areas out in here. This is all your seagrasses involved in here. Okay, so this is from the air, the same pier that's going out here, and this is Sargassum. Now it looks like a bunch of mud up in here, but if you look at this, you see the Sargassum on the sea surface. Almost all the rest of it in the dark in here is stuff that has fallen down, that has broken in pieces and bits and stuff, and it's coming in like mud. It has an impact on all the waves, that it's damping, it does damp out the waves, so that's important to the physical oceanography of the region. But the important thing, and then you go to sleep one night and everything's fine, wake up the next morning and your little bay looks like this. But at the same time off Sierra Leone, this was in 2011, you had this impact, and you can kind of barely see a guy up to his thighs down here walking in this stuff, and it can get extremely deep. Okay, so if you can imagine, look at this one now. This is underneath, and Hazel Oxenford took this picture, my colleague, and she took it because it was dark under there. That's the important point, okay? And you can see little fishes enjoying themselves in here, but it's dark and it's thick. It gets on the beach, and your little turtles may make it up through there, but then they can't get out and boil in the sun, so can't make it to the water. And these are turtles. You can see all the little bunches here that have died. They can't make it to the surface for air. This thing actually is a shark. Nobody knows how he got hammered there, but he did. And these you see piled up are all reef fish, you'll notice. Okay, so as this stuff is sweeping across the reef, it's carrying a lot of the stuff inshore. Okay, and this was the grass bed before Sargassum, and then after the Sargassum. So we can have a major, but how about fisheries? These guys are offshore. For Barbados, one of the main fishery is flying fish. They're fairly big, four-winged flying fish. And if you ever go to Barbados, that's one of the things you want to do, eat yourself flying fish. Okay, but this is from 1994 through 2017, and this red line is when the first arrival of Sargassum. So all I did was take the average of their catch and weight of flying fish from 1994 through 2011, the average, and then take it afterwards, and after it had risen, and then you see there's a 56.25%. There are other fish like dolphin fish, which you might know as mahi-mahi, was the second biggest. It fell in proportion. And wahoo also fell in proportion. But the problem here is it's not straightforward. What happens is that these guys, flying fish, must lay their eggs on floating debris. The eggs sink. They're not buoyant, so they must lay on floating debris. And before the sargassum, they'd put over little bits of debris like palm leaves or bamboo off their boats, and when the flying fish came in to lay their eggs, they dip them up or have a gill net surrounding it. But now they're zipping in to lay their eggs on sargassum. Okay, you don't need any, and zipping out because there's a heck of a lot of juvenile dolphin fish that are waiting for them there. So they're going in and going out. So there's a serious problem. So, but the flying fish seem to be replaced in the fisheries by a new thing that's showing up in their fisheries, almaco jacks. All right, so takeaway messages. It's very doubtful that the Sargasso Sea simply expanded its territory. That was one of the earlier hypotheses that seemed to have caught on with the press. This NER appears to be a separate consolidation in bloom area that was seeded by the Sargasso Sea, okay? The new area extends across the Atlantic from Brazil to West Africa. Sargassum on the coastline is not just a Caribbean problem. It is not clear, but this NER bloom possibly began with a combination of coincidental climate conditions and biological responses. Don't know. Coastal ecosystems are seriously harmed by massive invasions of pelagic sargassum, and offshore fisheries, including fish and fishers, can be either harmed or enhanced, but certainly changed. And this is from Emma Doyle. She's the ecologist. She's the Energizer bunny of the Caribbean, dealing with coral reefs and everything. And she's a little bit angry. It says the response to the sargassum influx has also been a knee-jerk reaction, okay? And all the uncoordinated and not always environmentally sustainable, okay? And it's basically, she's giving you various statements about sort of the same thing. We need to do a lot better job of just communicating and coordinating these efforts. So that's my presentation, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. At the end, we'll do some Q&A.
Okay.
If you don't mind. We have Dr. Hu. He's in Zoom. Yes, please. He will give us the where, when, and why observations from satellites of sargassum.
All right, thank you. So here's a cautious note first. You know, my 5-year-old computer sometimes shuts down itself for no reason. So if you see I disappear, that's the reason. And then I switch it to a laptop.
Okay.
All right. So Don already gave an excellent introduction on the sargassum source and the recent trend. And here I want to provide a perspective from satellite and to see what we know and what we don't know. Okay? And this is a collaboration among many people. And we work with colleagues within the university, outside, and with the partners, including Sargasso Sea Commission. I see Dr. David Freestone there. Great. So why do we use the satellites? People have been using data sheets to collect sargassum, to map sargassum. Okay. So slide number 2. Okay, yes. So this is from a Sea Education Association, and in the past 24 years, and that's for this map. This boat just went out all all they did was collect sargassum and weigh them and see what's in sargassum. And the map shows the density of the sargassum they found for the past 24 years. Each black dot is a measurement. And the density is color-coded in light and dark green. And dark green means higher density. You would say, oh, there's a lot of measurement. The truth is no, it's never been enough because they have only one boat. And even in the same year, they have to sample different readings in different seasons. So the composite map just gives you an overall picture without telling you where and when and how much, and if the difference makes sense or not. Because they are collected in different times of year, different seasons. And the next slide. And that's why we want to use the satellite. But how do we find this small sargassum clumps or rocks from satellite? Well, we have to use a very high sensitive satellite or very high resolution satellite. Either way is fine. And on the image on the screen is a Moses image. So this is not a photo. So it doesn't show a natural sargassum column. This is interpreted satellite image. And it's very big. You see the scale is 100 kilometers, but just about 1.5 meters. It's very big, and it's in the Atlantic. Okay, and you see from the images, there's a light green or yellowish slicks. These are huge sargassum rocks floating on the surface, and because they have a red edge reflectance, just like any land plant, grass, tree, we can detect this thick and quantify it. Okay. So next slide. So how do we know what we see is right? Okay. So we have to go to the field and measure sargassum and measure the weight and measure the reflectance to calibrate and validate what we see from satellite. And these are tiny patches to a satellite, so we have to validate it. The next slide. So with all the work we have been doing for the past few years, now we are able to map sargassum from satellites. We can map their weight, wet weight, dry weight, and the carbon content from space. And where do we do this work? To the right, that's a Google map showing the coverage of our monitoring system. We call Sargasso Watch System also. You see the full Gulf of Mexico currently and the western central part of Atlantic are covered, and Bermuda is covered. You may ask, why don't you cover everything, everywhere? We are limited in resource. Every additional reading costs computer power, human labor, and money. And so we're limited. This is the current coverage, and we can certainly expect if we find more. Next one. So this is our web design. Every day you can go to a certain region and find how much sargassum is there. On this example, this is March the 4th this year. So this image, if you click, you can bring that to Google Earth and navigate. So it shows the past week, the sargassum density. And you can navigate and you can combine with your data to have interpretation. Next slide. So how people use this? Well, they use it for many purposes. This is one example for the daily images. So there's a NAVA turtle rehabilitation program. After storms, they rescue the juvenile turtles from beaches and put in lab. And then they release in ocean. If they cannot find the right habitat for turtle, the turtle may die. Their survival chance is pretty small. So they have to find a habitat like a sargassum. And this is the example to show they use the real-time image to find this habitat. I believe David would like this picture, because this shows the value of sargassum as a habitat, not as a nuisance. Next one. So that's the real-time aspect. What about the past? How do we know how much sargassum is there in a certain region in the second part. We have mapped Sargassum amount for the entire Atlantic, okay, including Gulf of Mexico. And on the screen is a time series, a climatology for the past 18 years. For the month, for the months of March, April, May, and June, you see the progression of Sargassum amount in that part. And on the bottom is how much Sargassum changed over the month, over the year. And you see every year, it's the large amount appears in spring between March and June. But there is a substantial interannual change. In some years, for example, 2014, it's 5 times more than previous years. And some years we have that. But what exactly caused this change? We don't know, honestly. We are still analyzing the factors. We just don't know what caused it. So next slide shows another region. This is the Caribbean and the Central West Atlantic. So what is on the screen is the August of 2015 show it covers almost the entire region. Okay. The color code shows the density of Sargassum. Red means higher density. And if you look at the past 19 years, and it's consistent with what Don just said. It started from 2011, but 2011 is not that big. And in recent years, especially in 2015 and 2018, okay, the amount is just skyrocketing. Okay. What exactly caused this? Don mentioned some hypotheses, but honestly, we don't know. We don't know exactly what caused it. We can hypothesize, we can propose possible reasons. Next one. This is the animation to show the dominant current from Atlantic to the Caribbean. It's a 2-year cycle, so you may spend 20 seconds to visualize. So you see every month, every year, it started from the winter, spring months in the Atlantic, then transported by the dominant current to the Caribbean. Okay? So based on this, we can build a prediction model from the past statistics. Okay? And next slide. So we use this statistics-based prediction model to put out a monthly Sargassum bulletin for the Caribbean. So every month, we look at what's going on now, what happened in last month, what may happen in next month, in 2 months later. Every month, we have put out a bulletin and shared with a large community. And this is a website. So far, we have produced maybe 13, 14 monthly bulletins up to last month. You may read this monthly bulletin if you are interested. Next slide. So what about other areas? So the previous prediction for the Caribbean. What about the Gulf of Mexico? What about the Sargasso Sea, for example? The Gulf of Mexico is connected to the Caribbean through this loop trunk. And if there's a lot of Sargasso in the Caribbean, sooner or later, it will be transported to Gulf of Mexico and further through the Florida Strait to the North Atlantic, to the Sargasso Sea. And this is an image taken from summer 2018. And so the photo is from Florida Key in June 2018. And you see there's a Sargasso inundation from the Caribbean. This is the source. Okay? It's not a local, it's from Caribbean. And there are many reports from West Palm Beach. Even during this winter, they see a lot of Sargasso. I told them this is from the Caribbean. Next slide. I have the title "Why" in my slide, in my title first slide, but I don't have an answer. Okay, I only have a partial answer on the connectivity between different regions. I do not know what caused this interannual change, what caused the large bloom in 2018. Sargassum in the Caribbean Sea and the Central Atlantic. And it's likely to continue in the future. And in addition to those, I have shown satellite remote sensing is the only way to provide frequent and synoptic observation of sargassum, because they move. Unlike land vegetation territory, they move. The large picture is good, but there are a lot of details we still do not know, because these satellites are limited in their resolution. If the sargassum clumps are very small, we miss them. But where are those small clumps? And we still have a lot of work to do. And we do have infrastructure for real-time and for high cost for retrospective analysis. But still, we need to understand what caused the changes in recent years. And can we predict more than 2 months, more than 6 months? Can we predict the future? So those are still the questions that we need to answer. And as to the so what question, Don already touched on it, so I skipped it. With this, I will stop and welcome questions later.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hu. We have seen the big picture. What is it? Where is it from? What's happening? Sort of the why. Let's hear from Manolo Despradel, who's the general manager of Algeanova. It's a private company in the Dominican Republic. How is this impacting tourism in the Punta Cana area? And what is Algeanova, this company, doing with Sargassum? And with him, after him, Michael Keine will speak, because they work together in this project. We're going to be showing some videos. Can you hear us, Manolo?
Hello, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
yes. Okay, if you want to start, we're going to start with the first video.
Don't put the video yet. I mean, you can put it in the part.
Okay.
You put the video, put the music down so I can talk in the top of it. I want to congratulate the first people who respond, especially Dr. Hu. We're going to use your system a lot. That's going to help us. We are a company, Algeanova, that we are ready to prevent. We make a system to prevent, to recollect, and to transport the sargassum. We already have 5 years of experience. We started in 2013 when a little sargassum started bothering the tourism in the Dominican Republic. As you know, we live out of tourism. I mean, our main common income is tourism. So we live in an area that the sargassum started hitting us very bad. 2014 and 2015, that was the worst years. All year long, we have sargassum during those years. And we, at that time, we already have been involved on how to prevent it. So we create a barrier. Now you can put the video. We create a barrier to prevent the sargassum coming into shore. This barrier this is our 5th generation of the barrier, the one that you're going to see on the video. This barrier have a special material, UV material, and saltwater resistant. The cover of the barrier is made through a micro mesh, that is a material very strong to prevent anything happening at night, or a piece of rock or a boat that can run over, doesn't destroy the barrier. Inside the barrier is an air chamber, 30 centimeters of air chamber, so it's flexible and adapted to the ocean. This that you see now is the way we anchor on the bottom of the ocean by hydraulic system. We can do in sand, we can do in gravel, we can do in rock. We have a different way to connect it to the ocean. This chain connected to our barrier every 3 meters, and in it have 1 meter in the ocean to prevent the sargassum to coming in. Every barrier has 9 meters long, and you have 3 connectors each other to transmit the strength all the way to the barrier. Completely independent on the one to go down into the ocean. Right now, we have installed 4 kilometers in the area of Punta Cana. And in those kilometers, we create also a machine to recollect the sargasso, and a machine to clean the barrier, because the barrier have to be clean of algae, so the pressure of the current doesn't destroy the barrier. This recollected machine, we have a capacity today that we can recollect 1,000 tons a day. This is the machine. We have a 6-meter carpet in front, and we pack it into sacks that they are 1.5 cubic meter, equal to 1,300 pounds of fresh sargasso. For sure, sargasso is 80% of water, so as soon as you leave it a couple hours, it starts drying and losing some weight. This sargasso we transport it to the place, and then we transform it. I'm gonna let my colleague Michael Ken that is with us to explain to you the transformation. This is at the end of 2019, we will have the capacity in Punta Cana to recollect 300 tons daily of sargasso. That, as our experience, when the sargasso hit us, is a big. This is our new barge that is already on construction. It will be on the water middle of summer. The new design that we did on this barge, as you see, the carpet inside where the sargasso is, we remove it so we can keep going with the recollection. Our prototype one, the one that you saw below, teaches a lot. Sargasso, when it comes to the shore of Dominican Republic, it comes in huge quantity. But with 3 tons a day, we expected that we can take all this sargasso and transform it in something good. The way we see it is that the sargasso has been teaching us, and we see it as an environmental economic opportunity. As Michael going to explain to you, now we want the sargasso to come so we can transport it.
Yeah.
But we are in a point that the sargasso is, as Michael says, a goal of mine. So we see a big opportunity, and we arrive to a point that we achieve our goal, and little by little we are making it better, and more efficient. So for the transformation, I'm gonna let Michael to explain to you about the.
Do you want to use the second video?
While Michael speaks, just put it on while
Okay.
Michael speaks.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
We do. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear everything very well. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Manolo. What's happening is that many people have worked on the aspect of the incoming sargasso and how to take it out of the water or of the beach. And we concentrated on the aspect of what to do with it afterwards. We believe that there is tremendous economic opportunities to transform sargasso or any type of seaweeds into value-added products, mostly primarily for agricultural, organic agricultural production. So this is what we are going to implement in the Dominican Republic first as testing to come up with different products, and then whichever will have the highest market value, we will proceed with this in larger quantities. Now, one thing that we need to address whenever we talk about Sargasso is for the transformation, the main point is that you have very sporadic availability and punctual, very large volumes. So we need to investigate processes that can accommodate this. And the way we do it, we do two primary transformation. The first one, we're going to work with mulches because it's the least transformation and the quickest that we can do. So, and a mulch can be used in to cover soil surfaces, and it helps to conserve moisture. It improves the fertility and health of the soil. So and this is a fairly straightforward transformation. So we're going to proceed with this approach. The second approach we're going to take is to combine it with residues from results, residues that are mostly green residues, cutting from trees, garden maintenance, golf, and so on and so forth. We're going to compost the Sargasso with it. This will enable the reduction of the salt content and the heavy metals. And we are looking to provide a product for the plantations, cacao, banana, and even sugar plantations, and at the same time for the agricultural industry. Now, currently in the Dominican Republic, they have issues to import some organic fertilizer because there is a big movement to produce more organic crops, and mostly with the fair trade system, and a lot of it is exported to Europe at this time. But they have difficulties finding organic certified fertilizer. Well, we have it right there. It comes from the ocean, and all that we need to do is deliver it in the proper form. So composting is one very good solution, not only to bring value to the residues that are currently being piled up in dumps or sent to government dumps, and that we can recycle in nutrients that are very profitable for plants. So we are going to start, and the beauty about composting and mulching is that, you know, it's you can have a machine that works 24 hours a day turning the rows, and you can have in rows as long as you need, and you can build it up whatever quantity comes up. So these are two of the high volume, I would say, ways to process. And then we go on into higher value added products. One of them is the drying and flour milling to use for animal feed and organic fertilizers. The other one is to proceed with the hydrolysis of the sargassum to produce liquid extracts and foliar spray that are, in fact, biostimulants. There is a lot of seaweed extracts that are available worldwide. Nothing much from Sargassum, but we believe that it could be a very big possibility. And the last item that we're going to investigate is the biogas from the Sargasso. Now, seaweeds in general have a fairly low potential for biogas, but since it can be used as an energy source, we still want to investigate that. And we're going to use what is called a psychrophilic anaerobic digestion. This is a low temperature digestion that is much more appropriate to the kind of, you don't need to heat the biomass or heat the lixivier, and some trials have been, it's already quite widely used in Canada, this approach, so we're going to try it and see if there is enough potential with the Sargasso. So with all these approaches, we are confident, and we confirm this with the meetings with the various potential customers and partners in the Dominican Republic, that there is a great need for this type of product. Now, we plan, of course, to start as soon as possible, and we already have in place some trials going on, but we are waiting for the harvesting in order to initiate all this.
This is one of the machines that was invented by us. It's all done in aluminum, and this machine, what it does is it cleans the barrier. It put air on the chambers and fix any problem that we can have along the barrier. You have a water pressure pump, you have an air pump that we can put, and as you see, those two brushes clean all along, because water have to go through the net. If the net, the algae grow, the pressure is too high. So this is one of our machine that we designed to clean, because we have already stored 4 kilometers of barrier. Clean by hand is impossible. So if we can put the other one, the one before, This video that I'm going to show it to you, that was filmed last Saturday, I make it for this to show it to you. We have also installed 4 kilometers that start in Corales, pass in front of Club Med. As you see, this one right now is Club Med. It's friendly. Boats can be, we have opening for boats to come in and out to the open ocean. And as you see, the Sargasso, we put it in a direction of with current. So the Sargasso try to move along the currents all the way out until we reconnected the recollection. This barrier finished on the shorelines in an area called Serena. So this, I would like to invite all of you if you want to come and see this technician. As you see, the beach also, beach is clean. The Sargasso stay in this side. So tourism, we protect tourism. This is already, if not anymore in test. This is happening right now in the Pucatana area. And now we are installing a barrier in an open sea in Eden Rock Hotel. Because our barrier not just work into the lagoons, it's also work in open rock ocean. As I said, this is already not anymore in test. The only thing that we're making in test is on the transformation, and I hope by the end of this month we start all the composting.
Okay, thank you. Now let's hear from Dr. David Freestone. You're the Executive Secretary of the Sargasso Sea Commission. Tell us the other side of the story.
Let's go and stand over there.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed to the organisers for this. This is tremendous. And we have 10 governments associated with who've signed the Hamilton Declaration, which set up the commission, and one of them now is the Dominican Republic, so we're particularly pleased to be here. So this, you've heard the case for the prosecution, as it were. This is my my chance to defend. I certainly don't underestimate the impact of this. I think congratulate the Dominican Republic on what it's been doing. This technology is amazing. The problem is most of the little islands of the Caribbean have, this is quite a heavy investment, so they're the ones who've been feeling the impacts. And the only time I've made the front page of the Washington Post was describing the impacts in the Caribbean as horrendous. They didn't actually explain what I meant by that. I had like a book that they didn't quote. But, so my former colleague, Bob Watson, who was the head of the IPCC and the panel on climate change, used to talk about ozone, and he said it's the good, bad, and the ugly. So in stratospheric ozone is fantastic. It stops, forms a filter for UV rays. It's important part of our whole planetary ecosystem. But elsewhere, it's either bad, or when it's low level, it's really ugly. So I think that's kind of an analogy for Sargassum. So what I'm going to say is how important it is as a part of a natural ecosystem, and let's put the onus of showing why it's changed a little bit closer to home, right? I think the scientists are always very, very cautious about attributing blame. I'm a lawyer, and my colleague is a lawyer. We can be perhaps a little bit more expansive in our interpretation. So Dr. Johnson and Dr. Chuanmin Hu, we've actually worked together. We had a really important meeting, I think, in Key West 3-4 years ago, and NASA are actually helping with the work that Chuanmin's doing. So let me say a little bit about this system. So there you've seen that wonderful map. This is one actually from where it is. That was the first question everybody asks is, where is it? This is a fairly expansive map. But the historical maps go back longer than the 19th century. These go back to the 15th century, 15th, 16th century. And they all have that little core area, the one that Don Johnson showed us, slightly to the west of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. This is kind of, this is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge here. So this is this core area, which is the area that we're concerned with. These are areas of high seas, right? The blue areas are high seas. Nearly half of the planet is actually high seas. And so around Bermuda, which sits right in the middle of the Sargasso Sea area that we saw, this EZ, this is the area that we're talking about. So our project is actually interested in conserving a important high seas ecosystem. We started in about 2009, 2010, trying to stress, and with the leadership from the government of Bermuda, and we actually last week were in Bermuda again, on a major workshop on how we, how do we direct our work for the future. Mark Spalding's going to talk about that, I hope. So we thought we wanted to achieve some international recognition of the importance of the Sargasso Sea, not Sargasso, but the Sargasso Sea, and then to work with international organizations to get better protection under the Law of the Sea Convention. Do we need a new treaty to look at this, or can we do it under the existing ones? And then to use this for work that's being done in the UN. Currently, actually next week, the United Nations has its second session for the negotiation of an international legally binding instrument on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. So that's part of the process. So we started, this has been going on for like 15 years of discussions, so we wanted to try and expedite this. So what we had to show, if you like, is why the Sargasso Sea is important. And we've already seen kind of that it's a fairly overwhelming system. We like to call it golden rather than brown, as done with the golden rainforest in its right places. It's not politically correct to say that Columbus discovered much, because there were people already there, but there was nobody here in the Sargasso Sea when in 1492 we first discovered it. And you can see that's these mats, it's very rare to see mats this big now. And one of the impacts, of course, is that it's not sail-driven ships, but large motor vessels. So thick, just to see that, it's so thick that it's actually held back the ships. And we can see that, so when it's close into shore, you can see some of the negative impacts. So as we've heard, this is a large ocean-based Sargasso ecosystem. That's a large picture that was actually taken by Sylvia Earle. It's been one of our sponsors. Mostly in the high seas, but when it finds its way ashore, it's the problem. And it's important for the life history of a lot of really important species which we were recognized. So I'll move forward fairly quickly through those. Two types, Sargassum natans and Sargassum fluitans. Fluitans is closest to me. And it's actually, what we're finding on the Caribbean beaches, it's actually, and that was Amy Sudo who did the DNA work on it, is from the Sea Educational Association. It's actually a variant of Sargassum natans, Sargassum natans 8, which is rarely found in the Sargasso Sea. So, from our perspective, it's certainly Sargassum came from there, but it sort of seemed to have developed a life of its own, systems of its own, and obviously it accumulates plastics. So a lot of pictures, lovely pictures. These are the endemic species which are found within it. Our collaborators in Bermuda have been taking these wonderful pictures. They're adapted to actually living in the Sargassum, the Sargassum fish itself, which I think actually has adjusted fins so it can walk through the Sargassum. Some say it looks a bit like Gollum. It's only that big. So just some lovely pictures, and you see these are all living actually in the Sargassum itself. And it provides a habitat, but also we think spawning areas for some iconic species. I used to say threatened and endangered species, and I showed this slide in Norway, and I got some stick for showing the whales. But certainly billfishes, we think maybe, certainly to the north of Sargasso Sea is where the famous bluefin tuna spawn. Certainly important for turtles, all species of turtles as we've heard, and about 30 species of whales actually migrate through the Sargasso Sea. It seems that the humpbacks particularly like it as an sort of defoliant, and they can come up and let it rub along their backs. That was a picture taken fairly recently by a colleague in Bermuda. And it's more than just a floating system. We heard from Don Johnson about the Russians finding this areas on large outfit on the seabed. And these pictures here on the right shows, so these some of the mid-water species. But if you lower a weight down to the bottom with Sargassum on it, the deep water fish, well, they know what it is. They'll come and eat it. So it's actually like a bait. So they actually been experienced in. This suggests for thousands of years it's been falling to the bottom and being dealt with. And then we see some of these amazing species which we already have. So these floating mats. Mine is a bit sunnier, remember, than the one that Don Johnson showed us, which was very dark. This is what it's supposed to be like. And here, if you float anything in the water, a fishery that acts as a sort of fisheries aggregation device. So this is a huge fisheries aggregation device. And this is in Dorado. or a dolphin fish they call in the Caribbean, mahi. And every year, I spend a lot of time in Antigua, and every year about March or April, traditionally mats, relatively small mats, would come in from the north, and they would bring wahoo and dolphin fish, and the fishermen would welcome them. Now they're getting very large amounts coming from the south, which is a rather different proposition. And you heard that the turtles needed the an environment in which to spend this, what scientists used to call their lost years. They disappeared from the beach, and then suddenly they weren't a foot long. Where were they? And a lot of them in the Atlantic, anyway, spend their time actually in this. Provides a microenvironment, slightly warmer, provides them food, and then they feel ready to venture off into wider pelagic realm. And these are the fish eggs that we heard that the flying fish actually lay them in the Sargassum, and of course birds eating. So those are the fish eggs again, slightly close up. That's the, and this is actually that's a Sargassum flying fish, which is marked in the same particular way. So close up of these lovely pictures. And then an issue which is really unusual for the Sargasso Sea, not for Sargassum, but the Sargasso Sea, is that a species which isn't really regarded as iconic, which is the anguillid eel. If you look at an individual one, they certainly don't have the big eyes that we expect of polar bears and lions and things like that, but they have an amazing lifestyle. They live in brackish waters, fresh or brackish waters, and when they reach maturity, they migrate. They're a catadromous species. They migrate 3,000 or 4,000 miles to this area south of Bermuda in the Sargasso Sea, where they spawn and die. And it's like the salmon, but in reverse. Oh. And then the small ones, the leptocephali, they find their way back to Europe. And the same is true of the American eels. So this like Venn diagram of this Anguilla rostrata, which is the American eel, is in this area, similarly just south, and this is Bermuda is about here. So it's this area about 300 miles south of Bermuda, and the American eels find their way back into the big islands. The islands with rivers are really Cuba and Jamaica and Hispaniola, Haiti and Dominican Republic, and also into the central. They have an amazing lifestyle. They metamorphose two or three major ways. They start off, obviously, here as eggs, leptocephali. They make themselves into, then they change into glass eels, and there's a huge trade in glass eels, particularly driven by the Japanese, but by the worldwide sushi trade. The Chinese are collecting them. They fatten them up in big tanks, treat them with hormones to stop them all becoming males, which are smaller than the females, and then they export them. But in their natural lifestyle, they actually go up the rivers, and after about 20 years, they change again into yellow eels. They transform down, and then they metamorphose completely again, and stop eating. Their stomachs space becomes gonads, basically, breeding machines, and then they swim this huge distance where they spawn. And it's never been witnessed. We've never actually seen it. But the only reason we know it happens in these places is because we've actually found the leptocephali. These are millimeters. So these are creatures of 45 millimeters here, 25 here. That's the only way we've retrofitted the spawning. So this is an amazing, and it's a huge business, multi-million-dollar now as a result of it. So the Sargasso Sea also very important for, it's the first of the famous Challengers voyages were through the Sargasso Sea, which gave us an idea of really the birth of oceanography. Beebe was the man, Beebe, who's the man who actually first went down in a diving bell, thanks, from Bermuda. We actually saw where he lived in Bermuda last week while we were there. This is the Gyre station, the Bermuda Institute for Ocean Science. And these little guys are called Prochlorococcus. And they were discovered in the Sargasso Sea. 1 in every 4 breaths you take is created by these guys. Right, so this is what the message I'm getting, take-home message is, it's an amazingly important system. We actually been rewarded by seakeepers who we, in 2013, they actually are the ones who actually been helping Chuanmin Hu with his project in actually doing some ground truthing on some of the work there. So There are some threats to the Sargasso Sea itself, which are the same as all, the ones that we know from everyone: plastics, accumulated pollution, fishing as well. And we're worried about sargassum harvesting. Clearly, in the near-shore environment of the Caribbean, it makes really good sense. I'm really impressed by the entrepreneurial spirit, and I hope that we can spread that technology. But I wouldn't want to see it starting to harvest it in the high seas. You'll get introduction of exotic species, climate change, ocean acidification, maybe mining as well. The plumes from mining on the Mid-Atlantic Bridge could be a threat to the system, as well as possibly underwater cables. So the case is, who was it said? It was one of the famous hotelier, right, who said, well, location, location, location. So everything is right in its own place, and I think if there's a threat, the suggestion is that it's largely as a result of, we heard, spike in temperatures, changes in temperatures, increases in pollution maybe from the Orinoco and the Amazon Delta, which are actually causing the blooms. These are algal blooms to increase. So it may be that the threat is actually the old familiar defendant, which is Homo sapiens.
That's the best way to summarize it, I think. So far, location, location, location. If it's in the Sargasso Sea, it's good and we want to protect it. If it's a sargassum and it's arriving at shores, then we don't want it. It affects tourism and health and other things. So, okay, interesting. Let's finish this amazing lineup that we have today with Dr. Spalding. He's the president of the Ocean Foundation, and he will have the last words.
Thank you very much.
Before the Q&A.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. We've worked in the Dominican Republic quite a bit ourselves with the Punta Cana Foundation, and then most recently designing the sustainable management system for the new Tropicalia project in Savannah Bay. We also have been supporting the Sea Education Association in its collecting of sargassum and measuring what's going on. So this is an area and a topic that's very near and dear to our heart. As David mentioned, I'm one of the commissioners for the Sargasso Sea Commission. This is the 5th anniversary of the Hamilton Declaration, which created this commission, and the recognition by now 10 nations of the importance of this Sargasso Sea space. And we have our secretariat, the commission, and then the 10 signatory governments who meet regularly to discuss how to protect the sea and what needs to be done there. The end result is that we end up touching on science and research, fisheries, shipping, seabed mining, seabed cables, and then data management regarding sargassum. And so we are not surprised that we get called upon to talk about sargassum on a regular basis, since it's something that we're touching regularly. I think we have to put this all in context, however. The ocean is fundamentally changing. It's getting warmer. The chemistry is changing, salinity, alkalinity, etc. are all changing. We have it filled with plastics. We have all sorts of other things happening. And so we're not just seeing this macro algae bloom in the near. We are seeing microalgae blooms on the coast of Florida and other places, right? We are seeing the results of the change of the ocean in multiple places around the planet. And so just as the macroalgae is affecting the coast and tourism in the Caribbean, microalgae is affecting the coast and tourism in other places. And so we have to connect this back to what we're doing to this system, how the human activities globally in carbon emissions, etc., are changing the fundamental chemistry, temperature, and even currents in the ocean, right? This is a contextual problem. As you've heard, we have negative effects to aquatic resources, fisheries, waterways, shorelines, and tourism in the Caribbean. But we also have heard from David and others that the sargassum in its natural state in the mats out in the high seas are a refugia for various organisms and nursery habitat. The U.S. has prohibitions on harvesting sargassum because of its habitat qualities, right? And we also believe that if you allow it to get on the beach, it can be an important element in shoreline stability because it will sit there and collect sand and other material to build up the shoreline, which may be beneficial when the next hurricane comes through. Now, this is also offset by the fact that it will inundate and kill young mangroves, seedlings, and Spartan grasses on the beach. But we have to think about this, and we have to remind ourselves that if we remove everything for the intent of protecting tourism, we may be making some mistakes in doing this. As we do try and protect coastal infrastructure and coastal tourism, we need to think about the ecologically friendly ways to do so. The sargassum that you saw collected by the entrepreneurs in the Dominican Republic is not just sargassum, right? There is no way to separate any of the animals or creatures that live in the sargassum from the sargassum when you collect it and shred it and use it for something else. There are plastics there as well, right? You can't separate those out easily as you do this collection with a barrier. We also have to think about the unintended consequences of the barrier and the net below it, right? We have banned drift nets and other kinds of nets that float like this in the Pacific and other parts of the world because of bycatch, things that get caught in them. We know that the similar floating barrier with a net below it that was designed by the Ocean Cleanup that was deployed in the Pacific Ocean listed how many sea turtles and other animals were going to be killed in the process of trying to remove plastic from the ocean. And so we have to think about those unintended consequences of this kind of technology. We have heard, come across my desk certainly, proposals to turn the sargassum in the Caribbean into all sorts of other products. And this may prove to be the saving grace here. Right now, the #1 use of the sargassum once it's collected is fertilizer. The #2 use in volume is do nothing, landfill or something else like that, right? If we are going to collect this and we're not going to use it, we're letting something go by. Animal feed was mentioned, compost was mentioned, biofuel was mentioned. But there have also been proposals to work on this as a source of pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals, bioelicitors, fungicides, apply it to mushroom cultivation because it works remarkably well for that, activated charcoal, making disposable plates and utensils. Interestingly, it forms a nice barrier against giant African snails. The challenge for this is, is this a new permanent condition, right? Have we changed the ocean system such that we can expect to receive, as our colleague said, we hope to keep seeing this. Otherwise, these business models don't work out, right? If you're going to invest in the booms and you're going to invest in the collectors and then you're going to invest in the infrastructure to make it into disposable plates and utensils or something, or even there was one person who in Mexico who compressed the sargassum into bricks and made a house with it. Is there going to be a predictability from a business perspective to make those investments, right? Are you going to be able to have the constant supply of the material to make things from such that it will justify the investment? And because we don't know really what the cause of this is, we don't know exactly where it's coming from, and only have recently figured out some of the predictability of how to see it coming from the satellite, it's very hard for traditional financing, bank financing or someone else like that, to invest in this. The only reason it's been viable in what you saw being done in the Dominican Republic is because they're trying to save their tourism revenues, right? And so it's an offsetting loss. We've done a little bit of work looking at this with JetBlue and with the Punta Cana Foundation, and we know that there are people who cancel their rooms after they've arrived, or cancel their rooms because they've read about this problem before they even come. And so there are measurable losses in revenue. And so that's if you want to call it that, that's a source of justification for the spending on the collection and conversion of the materials. The last thing I will mention that I think is critical here is, you know, we don't know exactly how the loop current in the Caribbean works, the Gulf of Mexico works. We've just given out, the National Academy of Science just gave out, I think, $15 million for physical oceanographers to study the loop current based on an examination of what we don't know about it. We also have heard that everything from the currents in the Atlantic are changing because of temperature change in the ocean and glacial melts, right? So some of what we're seeing here is a shift in the actual physical oceanography, not just the chemistry, not just the biology, and we don't know what we've set up for ourselves. And so this is going to be a unfortunately, big learning experience for all of mankind, and unfortunately for the island states in the Caribbean. So let me stop there.
Thank you so much. Well, once again, before heading directly to the Q&A, I'm not going to take any time. I just want to thank you again, all of the speakers. I couldn't be more happy with the selection that we've made, and we're happy to have you here. And also to the ones at Zoom, if you're still there, thank you for being with us. Who has questions? I saw your hand first.
A couple. The first slide said there was a reference to health. Was that human health or ecosystem health?
Human health.
What's the human impact?
Well, I mean, it's rotting on the beach, basically. There's hydrogen sulfide. Yeah, a lot of hydrogen sulfide. I mean, if you just load your beaches and you have houses and resorts and you got rotting material there, rotting vegetables there, I mean, you've got a health problem.
Okay.
It's the literal smell that you encounter if you are near this on the beach. And it's similar to the microalgae blooms that we see in Florida that are getting in particulates in the air and causing breathing problems.
We've had reports from sailboats going by that they veer out around the island because the island itself stinks.
Sure. Now, all this is tended to stress, it seems to me, the geographic dispersion. Is that an accompanying volumetric explosion as well, or so it's density and geographic?
Absolutely, yes.
Right, and the work on creating a useful product from this, or products, or whatever, is that an organized effort, or entrepreneurs sort of scattered around working on it?
Thank you for asking that. I think it is not sufficiently organized. I don't believe that the Inter-American Development Bank or the Caribbean Development Bank or any other institution that might finance this outside of traditional finance is actively behind some kind of financing of development of this. And so it has been disparate entrepreneurs, many of whom don't get to communicate with each other because of the insular nature of the Caribbean.
I'd add, if I meant that, so you heard that we started in 2009, 2010. You also heard the first inundation was 2011. So suddenly this was my fault, right? Press calling, and I go to the Antigua a lot, and I had to go on the radio and explain it. We aren't actually responsible for this. But what we did was to respond. It's not our core mission, right? The Caribbean inundation beaches, because we're more interested in the high seas part. But we linked up with the Caribbean Environment Program, which is based in Kingston, Jamaica, and they have a very good So we have a big website. If you look at our website, we have a page which is about this, and that links to the Caribbean Environment Program. They have a regional activity center in Guadeloupe, and they have got they share all these videos and the technology, etc. But you're quite right. It's not terribly well organized, but it's just like more like a information exchange rather than an organized response.
And the last one then,
Okay.
is there anything in the Pacific versus all Atlantic? It hasn't spread to the Pacific.
No, unlikely to, because it's very much an Atlantic species. It's
It's
the only one in the world.
It's a North Atlantic species, from my
Right.
understanding.
Can I
It's
jump
not.
in here?
Oh,
Yes, sure.
Somebody asked about the Pacific. In the Western Pacific, there was Sargassum bloom, okay? But it's a different species. It's called the Sargassum honori, which grows on rocks on the bottom.
Huh.
And if you have a wind storm to detach that Sargassum from the bottom, they float on the surface, they continue growing, they form a bloom. And that has been there for several years already.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Here.
Hi, thank you all for your presentations, really interesting. Can someone talk about what happens right here in the coastal zone? I think it's an interesting question as to whether or not we harvest on the beach or in the coastal area. And do we know about negative, positive within this area just before beaching? Are we getting hypoxia, or are organisms dying in this zone, or is it when they come up on the beach?
So I'll start, and I suspect our colleagues in the Dominican Republic have an answer to this as well. We believe that if you collect the Sargassum offshore and immediately do something with it, it's still alive. Its usefulness for fertilizers and all sorts of other things is much, much higher than if you allow it to get anywhere near the beach and begin to die and rot. Simple biology there of the not losing the nutrient value.
Right.
We also know the closer it gets to the coast, the more it buries seagrasses, mangrove seedlings, critters on the beach. Dr. Johnson also mentioned the nesting habitats of turtles and all that sort of stuff. Also, it is very difficult to mechanically pick up on the beach without picking up lots of other stuff. Mm-hmm. And so the harvesting at sea with the boom design is easier, less intensive in terms of labor. So there's loss of value of the Sargassum and harm if you let it get too close to the coast, and better value and easier collection out offshore.
Manolo or Michael, do you want to say something about that?
No, if there's any question, we are, if any question for us, we are happy.
Okay. Margie.
Actually, when the Sargasso, it was, they were talking about the species that they are in the Sargasso that they are all right. But when the Sargasso touch the shore, the sand or Recife, water, it decomposes, and when it decomposes, the oxygen goes so low that everything that around it died. So when the Sargasso, as soon as come to shore, is so damaged for everything, not just for economical tourism industry in Dominican Republic, for the ecosystem, for the as the first guy said, for the seagrass, for everything. So Sargasso cannot touch the shore. It had to be in the open ocean, moving from one place to another. As soon as it comes into the beaches or into the road, start doing so much damage.
Could I just add, it looks from this picture like it's come over the fringing reef. Usually in Bermuda, where it comes over the fringing reef, the predators strip it of the animal. So we were there last week, and we looked and we took some out of the inside the reef and shook it out. There are a few shrimps and things, but all the fish had gone, right? So it gets stripped. So once you're over the reef, most of the Caribbean islands have those fringing reefs. So it's sort of that's a trade-off issue.
Can I just,
I'm sorry.
can I
Yeah.
address that too?
Sure.
One of the problems with my group are looking at it is the fishers. This is offshore stuff that they're fishing. You know, they go out 50 miles or so and drift back, and you know they're relying on their fads, the floating, their fish aggregation devices and so forth. And right now they're kind of stumped with this whole thing. It's the fishers. I mean, this is offshore now in the mats, and the fishers can't fish the way they've traditionally fished. Number one, there does seem to be a difference in the assemblages that are associated with the mahi-mahi that they're catching, who are chasing the flying fish, who are dashing in and laying their eggs and coming out, are now mostly juveniles, and they're catching juveniles, and that's upsetting a lot of the fishermen, that some of the fishermen put juveniles into the market because we don't know what the impact is going to be on that. So basically, and they're being replaced by almaco jacks in the fisheries, the flying fish. So it's unclear exactly that, you know, this is only a beach problem. If you're a small fisherman in Barbados, it's an offshore problem. You know.
But Barbados flying fish, I suppose they're a unique Caribbean. They're the only ones really there. I mean,
Well, they're pretty extensive.
they're important, but you know, most of the other Caribbean islands and demersal fish, they don't do.
Yeah, but
but it's still important though.
The dolphin fish is
They're
the second
sustainable.
most caught fish here in Barbados, and they're changing.
Right.
You know, and the wahoo, which is the third, they're changing. You know, so the harvest of all of those are going down when there's sargassum present. And if you took a look at my slide with before and after sargassum and the catches, you'd see that there's a couple of spikes that are coming up. And that was during the years in which, even though it was during the sargassum era, there was no sargassum present there. So the fishery returned to normal. It didn't enhance the fishery. It returned to what was normal, but it seems to be overall in a trend changing. Okay, so I'd just like you to factor that in, that things aren't going, when you're dealing with biological, physical interactions, things don't always go back to the way they were.
Right.
So real quick, I just am curious whether these patches sequester carbon dioxide, they absorb any.
So, I mean, all plant material in the ocean takes up carbon and stores it in its own body system. Part of our concern is, you know, if you then burn it in biofuel, you're re-releasing it. If you allow it to rot, you're re-releasing some of it. So yeah, it is a plant, so it'll do photosynthesis and take up carbon.
And there's an argument. I mean, speaking to some scientists in Woods Hole, that this could be one of the oldest living species around because it breaks, you know, from the same root, right? And so it's been, as I've trying to point out with the benthic species, it's been dropping to the bottom for a very long time. So we think it's certainly in the Sargasso Sea, think it's a very important carbon sink.
Okay.
Thank you. Very elucidating discussion. Problem, consequences, possible solutions, impact. You know, thank you. Really well done. I used to work as an analyst for Fish and Wildlife, but more recently I'm on the development side of the house with the U.S. Embassy at various locations. We saw it in Liberia, Sargasso, and given that the shallowness of the food table there, the agriculture, I mean, fertilizer is a huge issue. Pretty much, it's a 1 to 2 country crop, and looking at what the other gentleman mentioned, the opportunities to potentially look at interlinkages with the World Bank, Inter-American Bank, or the other would seem to me very fit, very suited to looking at longitudinally for the argument that's been presented. So that's more of a comment. My direct question is, in terms of the demand on the supply chain, Mr. Manolo's and Michael's the opportunities that they're presenting, are we just mitigating at the moment? We realize it's a relatively small scale model at this time, but is it mitigating loss, or is there profit at the moment? And is the relationship driven strictly, the profit relationship driven strictly by the resorts or the tourism industry?
Nothing here.
Manolo?
Can you repeat? I mean, because I can't hear her very well because of the microphone. Can you repeat the question so I can answer well?
In terms of supply chain, is your model is very impressive. Is it being driven in terms of the demand? Are you merely at this moment on this current scale? Is it merely mitigating loss, or are you actually in the profit with the current scale of operations? And is the demand strictly from the tourism side at this moment?
At this moment, our system born because of the tourism industry. We create this to protect the tourism. That's our number one priority, to create the system. By the time we were working on it, because of the volume of the Sargasso that we recollected, we decided to get into the transformation. So, first of all, it's dedicated to help the tourism industry. And we were hired by a tourism area called Punta Cana that all of you know, especially with the group of Punta Cana, there is the 4 kilometers that is installed. So yes, it's dedicated to tourism. Prevention is our number one, that is the barrier. Recollection, because we cannot leave the Sargasso because the water become brown. So it's, and then the transformation. Transformation, I believe, strongly believe, because now we know it will be a big surprise on the Sargasso. Now we see a big potential on the Sargasso into the agriculture into the Dominican Republic.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. Are you in the profit margin or just mitigating loss from the tourist industry at this moment?
Punta Cana give us a group of Punta Cana have a foundation. They did all the permission and all the government permission for us to do the installation. But our product is 100% available for any stuff. Right now we are working with the government of Mexico because 2 hotels hire us Moon Palace 3 kilometers there, and we're just working on the permission of the Mexican government.
So if I can answer the question as well, I mean, we've seen multiple proposals come through the foundation for funding, and none of them pencil out to make a profit in the short term. The investment in the technology, the investment in the booms, the investment in maintenance, all requires some sort of upfront subsidy to get started, and it's the mitigation of harm to the tourism industry that justifies the expense in the Dominican Republic, and probably will justify the expense in Mexico, in the Yucatan. Unless and until there is a revenue stream from the transformation that is predictable and has, let's say a 5 or so year predictable lifespan, you're not going to show a profit on removal and transformation.
Thank you.
That's a couple more questions.
Yeah, this is related to that. We saw the predictions and the newsletters, but I wasn't sure how accurate they were. Like, what was your analysis of whether the predictions were correct?
They've been reminded.
Well, it depends. Let me just see if I've been working on prediction. I'll be making a prediction when I go back home of the regional bulletin. Chuanmin Hu has been making these, what I would think of as short-term predictions. You see something offshore, and what are the winds and currents going to be like over the next 7 days, which is about as far as you can get. I've been working with climatology and trying to predict way out into the Atlantic, and working with different models, different currents that I can find in the climatology of it. And frankly, it's pretty poor right now. I'm up to about a skill level of, I would call, between 0 and 1, I'm up to a skill level of about 0.5. And the problem is not of the models, the problem is not with the ocean currents, the problem is that with the satellite, you just can't get it all. And so it's, and that's where we're at. I mean, we have predictability, but I would call it weak predictability.
Could I'll add to that, if I may. There's a kind of bush telegraph that's developed through this UNEP Regional Activity Centre. So everybody sends in notes, and particularly Barbados is right there out in the front, right? So once things start coming out from Barbados, then the other islands get an idea of where it's coming, and boaters are sending in reports as well. So it's kind of, but it's pragmatic. But the science we could do. The problem is it's under the water, right? That's so it is the satellites aren't seeing it. So.
Well, no, the basic, well, there are two things. We can't see the equatorial regions because of the clouds.
Right.
Okay, and I'm not sure what over off Africa and the Gulf of Guinea, but if you look at the satellite images from those areas, you can't see much of anything there.
It's never been a priority area for satellite observation.
Well, it has. I mean, who has come up with some
you want to say something, Dr.
nice, well, wait. No, it's okay. So we're kind of confined over to the western or the central Atlantic, but because what I can see. Plus, you know, it's not just a cloud cover, it's the fact that this stuff clumps together and then it disperses. And you get some wind pattern coming through, storm coming through, it disperses. So you can't see it in the satellite because it doesn't cover enough of a pixel in order to make the peak goes up. So there's all of these things that are complicating what he does in order to give it to me to do these long-term predictions.
I agree. Let me add something on the satellite capacity. We do have limitations. I believe I said it, and Don said it well. In the tropic Atlantic, the cloud cover is very thin. It's ITCZ, intertropical convergence. So 70% of the time we see clouds. Also, limitation comes from the coarse resolution. These clouds are pretty small. And if we have a coarse resolution satellite, we just cannot see anything, okay? So we have to go higher resolution, finer resolution. And that if the clouds are not continuous, we have scattered clouds. With a higher resolution satellite, we can see through the gaps between clouds. So that's the next step we're going to change. But we're going to change just for a small region because we are limited in people and funding. And if we have enough, we can expand to the entire tropic Atlantic to fill the gaps, to fill the information gap, which is not just critical for observation, but also critical for modeling, as Don just said.
Thank you.
I had a question. I was just very excited to hear about the repurposing the Sargassum both into biofuels and into, at least in one case, the house building materials. So I'm wondering what the viability is. Can that expand beyond the Caribbean, or is it something that could truly be, in anyone's opinion, a viable building material?
I think the answer goes back to what I've said a tiny bit already, which is you're not going to invest in collecting it, transforming it, making it into bricks, and then shipping the bricks unless you know you've got a constant supply of Sargassum. And we don't know that yet, right? We can't predict out into the future enough. And so until that predictability is there, investing in the production is not going to be there either.
Could I add to that? I mean, one of the things we're worried about is these machines are very sophisticated and they don't look particularly good ocean going, but the place where you have got a consistent supply is in the Gyre in the north, in the Sargasso Sea. You don't want to see this technology spreading out into the high seas. There have been proposals for harvesting in the high seas, which And it's an area, of course, which is beyond national jurisdiction. So this is an issue. Making it too successful is a kind of another problem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I want to comment on what you just said. I don't think that anybody really wants to threaten the Sargasso Sea. Everybody understands the importance of it for migratory species. So, and I think y'all have done a great job in protecting that. To address your question, so the Department of Energy, RPE, their innovation section, is interested in farming macroalgae for conversion to energy and co-products.
Is that, are they part of NREL or is that separate?
It is separate. NREL is a national lab, but this is an interesting program that's looking at Sargassum, but also other forms of macroalgae, because we need new ways of producing our raw materials. And the ocean is, in a lot of respects, polluted, but not used and not worked with in beneficial ways that both help the ocean and produce a reliable source of biomass for humans and, in the meantime, helping marine species and ecosystems.
Thank you. If I may just add, it's relating to what I was talking about before with, but with the plastics that are growing here, the plastics that are being, just collected and attempted to clean up everywhere. IKEA is building with recycled plastic now, some of its furniture products. So, maybe this is something where, I don't know if in the Dominican Republic, but certainly in different islands of the Caribbean and different coastal communities like in Costa Rica, there's just a lot of plastic wash up that could be repurposed. So it's that whole cycle.
Thank you all for coming. We're gonna have a mingling at the end, so if you wanna enjoy some of the food and then talk to each other, we're gonna hang around for a bit. Thank you all for coming. This is very interesting. I know we can spend here hours talking about this. So thank you so much to all of you. Thank you for coming.